You
together
did you really?
in North Carolina. We both started as reporters.
In North Carolina?
Morehead City, well, Greenville.
Well, Greenville, North Carolina.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience.
Y'all let me know when you're ready.
We're ready.
I'm good. Yep.
When I think of emergency room nurses, I think of the most wonderful people in the world. And I'm not saying that Michelle Snover is not a wonderful person, but last night she did something that she shouldn't have done. She drank a whole lot of alcoholic beverages and drove a vehicle. And while she drove that vehicle, there was also an 8-year-old child in the vehicle. And guess what? She ran through a cul-de-sac and into a retention pond where neighbors had to help her get out of the vehicle, and the 8-year-old child had to get out and swim to the shore. Michelle knows better. She works in an emergency room and she sees the aftermath of horrible crashes and tragedies. But this is at least the second time she's been arrested for DUI. And here's the thing that's interesting to me. While we were conducting the DUI investigation, she'd say, you know, I parked my car and Uber brought me here. And the deputy said, you parked your car in that retention pond? And she'd say, yes. And Uber brought you here? And she would say, yes. And she would say, if you just turn me loose, I'm okay to drive. I can drive home. I'm okay. It was a frightening thing for us to see. She continued, even after we were in the county jail, to say, where are we? And we'd say, you're in jail. Well, why can't I go home? Well, you're in jail. And she said, why am I being arrested? For driving under the influence. She would continue to make statements that she didn't drive in the retention pond, and it was really a tragic event. The good news is she's okay. The good news is that the 8-year-old that was with her didn't drown. It certainly could have been a tragedy of monumental proportions instead of a tough wake-up call that she received last night. But Michelle, for all the wonderful things you do in the emergency room, and you truly are a person that saves lives, you know better. We're glad you're not hurt. We're glad the 8-year-old child didn't drown. And we're glad that the neighbors came out to help you because you weren't in any shape to help yourself. She even made the statement, well, working in the emergency room, I know that you're not supposed to take a breathalyzer because it could be used against you. She took a breathalyzer. Well, quite frankly, she was intoxicated beyond all measure, and that was evident in all of her statements and the test she took as well. See if there's any notes that I forgot here. I think the most compelling statements were over and over. She never did comprehend exactly the situation she was in. She never believed she was a threat to herself, to the 8-year-old child she was driving, or to other people on the road. But at the end of the day, the good news is that no one was injured, and Michelle, as soon as she is cleared through all of the appropriate processes, can go back and work in the emergency room and save some more lives. Last night, we were fortunate that her colleagues weren't having to try to save her life or the 8-year-old child that was riding in the car with her. Any questions?
Sheriff, have you had a chance to listen to the 911 call?
I haven't listened to the 911 call.
You said that you think she should be able to go back to the emergency room and work?
Well, certainly when she's sober, she's a qualified, competent nurse. And I'm not suggesting for a minute this episode should cost her career. But I'm suggesting that this should be a wake-up call to her and to those that love her, that she's got some issues, because this is at least the second time that she's been arrested for drinking and driving, and she was found apparently not guilty the first time. But this one will be a different story.
In her court records, it says she got a DUI amended to reckless driving.
Pled down to reckless driving. That's not uncommon. But that's a sign. And the sign is that this is a lady we trust. This is a lady that saves lives. And she needs to save her own life because next time it could be fatal. Next time she could be needing the services of her colleagues. So I admire the work that she does, but she's got to get help because she was so intoxicated that she agreed that she parked her car in this retention pond, that Uber brought her there.
Lakeland Regional Health, are they the ones that told you she's a good nurse, or do you know her personally?
I know that I don't know her personally, but I know this. I know if you work in Lakeland Regional Health's emergency department, you are a good person that has met the highest standards to be a registered nurse, and they wouldn't keep you there if you didn't do a good job. We know Lakeland Regional Health is the busiest emergency room, I believe, in the state of Florida, and one of the busiest in the United States. So at the end of the day, we don't wish her ill will at all. We wish her to make sure that she doesn't drink and drive, and preferably if she has this much trouble with alcohol, it doesn't look like she needs to be drinking at all. She didn't recognize that she was intoxicated out of her mind, that she was not capable of driving. She didn't know where she was, and it was the whole event was frightening, but she's fortunate. It certainly could have turned out much worse.
How is that 8-year-old child?
The 8-year-old child's fine. She wasn't hurt in the crash when the vehicle went into the retention pond, but the 8-year-old child had to get herself out of the car and out of the pond.
You're usually a lot tougher on people.
Well, I think I'm pretty tough on her. I'm not happy with her conduct. But I also respect the fact that what she does is save lives. So the contrast here is we're fortunate we weren't having to save her life last night. So I think I'm pretty tough on her whenever you air out someone of that status publicly for driving as crazy as she was driving with an 8-year-old child in the car and obviously intoxicated out of her mind to the point she admitted parking the car in the retention pond and riding Uber there, whatever that meant.
Sheriff, does she have any idea, where she was coming from, going to?
Well, I know where she was going to. She was going to the county jail. She doesn't know where she was coming from, and she wasn't aware that she was at the jail when she was at the jail.
She said something about she was going to meet a guy.
She did. She met a deputy. And he was a guy. So yes, she said she was leaving to meet a guy, and a guy's exactly what she met. The guy was the deputy sheriff that arrested her for DUI.
How long did toxicology, how long did that take to come back?
Well, we did a breathalyzer. I don't believe we did a blood screen on her, so we won't see if there were any other substances in her body.
Okay. Did they tell you that we found drugs floating around
No,
in her bag?
no,
It appears to be her bag.
no,
We'll turn that over.
Yeah, your deputies have it now, but.
no. And we haven't charged her with that, so we wouldn't comment about that until we see what the end game is. But you would have had to have drank a whole lot of alcohol to get in that condition last night. She was, you know, when you're very intoxicated from whatever substance and you don't realize you're intoxicated, you're really intoxicated.
What do you have to say, just, I guess, in summary? She was with a child and that drunk, and this is apparently maybe not the first time she's been arrested for DUI.
Well, she's got an issue. She's certainly got a problem. And I can tell you this unequivocally. It's bad enough when you put yourself at risk with a DUI. It's really bad when you put others in other vehicles or pedestrians at risk. But you add on top of that an 8-year-old child that you're driving in the car with you, that's a bad day. That's a bad day. And bad choices cause people to die.
Do you know who has that child now, is it?
We would have referred that child for DCF services, and certainly I'm sure the child's in the hands of the child's relatives now. Okay? Anything else? Thank you very much. Y'all are wonderful.